a definition. There's numerous definitions of Article 5. You know that, right? But I'm committed to being their friends. You know, I've become friends with many of those leaders, and I'm committed to helping them.
We're with them all the way. Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That was President Trump aboard Air Force One. After the NATO meeting, I begin today by talking with Majority Leader of the United States Senate, Senator John Thune of South Dakota. Hello, Leader. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hugh, always good to be with you. Thank you.
I gather you're not surprised that President Trump is complimentary of NATO, because I really don't think he's never not been, other than they need to pay more.
Right, and he's gotten them to pay more, which is a huge accomplishment and long overdue. This is something where the U.S. has shouldered the burden for so long, and a lot of these countries are more than able to step up in a more significant way, and it's encouraging to see that they are, and it wouldn't have happened without President Trump's leadership.
So, Leader Thune, let's start with the American strikes on Iran on Friday and Saturday morning and their aftermath and the ceasefire. How do you assess President Trump's leadership here, and how do you assess the damage that we know has been done to Iran?
Well, I think there's no doubt that Iran's nuclear program was severely set back as a result of they were very precise, and I'd have to say incredibly impressive strikes, the way it was executed. And as General Kane briefed yesterday, the final damage assessment will obviously take some time, but I expect that we'll get an interim update. We've got an all-senators briefing tomorrow that Secretary Rubio and Secretary Hegseth are going to be at and there to answer questions. But I think you have to give the president incredible credit. I made this comment yesterday, but I was a senior in high school in 1979 when the Shah was overthrown, and the Carter administration's many mishaps kind of were not unlike what we saw with Biden the last 4 years in terms of dealing with folks on the global stage. And the president did something that was just historic. And there's nothing, I was voted for Ronald Reagan, my first presidential election in 1980 in many respects, because I saw that peace through strength in him. And the country was desperately looking for that at the time. Country was desperately looking for that this time around. And I think that's why people across this country voted for President Trump.
And I think the action will speak for itself. I'm not worried about the leaks from the Pentagon, though it's an irritant, Leader Thune. What do we do about people who don't take seriously their oath?
Yeah, I think that when you've got something like this and you've got service members in harm's way and potential for loss of life, American lives, you can't tolerate that sort of thing. It is absolutely inexcusable, and I think that people like that have to be held accountable.
So, Leader Thune, before I go to the one big beautiful bill, one thing we've seen over the last month is Ukraine driving trucks to Siberia and using drones. We've seen Israel somehow building a drone factory and destroying Iranian air defenses from within the country. Do you have any concern about the fact ours is an open country? Anyone can come here. Who knows what they're building in the cornfields of South Dakota?
Well, I think we have to be, especially now, alert and aware, and I think it's on all of us, incumbent on all of us as Americans, to pay attention to what's going on around us. But obviously this starts at ensuring that people who come into this country are very carefully vetted, which for the last 4 years under the Biden open borders policy, we know that people are streaming across that southern border, including people on the terrorist watch list. So it's very well possible there could be people here, these sleeper cells that have been alluded to, but I think we all have to take the steps that are necessary. And we've got people in the White House now and in the heads of departments and agencies that are doing the work of ensuring that we are closing our American border. But that doesn't mean that there haven't been people that snuck in the last 4 years. And I think we all need to be aware of and diligent about watching for things that are out of the ordinary, reporting them, and I think they'll have ample support from this White House and, as I said, the various law enforcement agencies in rooting out anything that might present a threat to the American people.
I hope you are right. Now, Senator, let's turn to the one big beautiful bill. Steph Knight, who is with Axios, got a great picture of you today, leaving the Republican Senate lunch and standing looking out a window. I'm showing it on the Salem News Channel, which you can't see right now. And you're talking animatedly with somebody. What's that all about? She said it was Speaker Johnson.
Right, yeah, and we've been...
Let me ask you, the parliamentarian has begun to make rulings. Have any of them shocked you?
No, I think for the most part, most of what we've seen has been I mean, there's always a few surprises. There was a couple of surprises actually that we got through. But I think for the most part, we kind of anticipated, because we've been through this enough, and we sort of pre-litigated a lot of this stuff, knowing full well what the thresholds are that we can push in terms of getting her sign off on some of our policy ideas. But as you know, this particular bill represents pretty much the not totality of, but certainly a big part of President Trump's agenda. And we want to make sure that we deliver, at least on the domestic side of the agenda. And so we're trying to get as much across the finish line as possible. But there are always setbacks. That happened with the Democrats when they tried to do the Inflation Reduction Act a couple of years ago. They tried to raise the minimum wage. She struck that down. They tried to legalize the DACA population. They struck that down. They tried to get the Clean Power Plan, so-called Clean Power Plan, she struck that down too. So if it's principally about policy and not spending and revenue, you're going to have a problem. But the Democrats also created a template that we've been using to as much as we can through reconciliation, obviously at 51 votes as opposed to 60. And so believe me, we're being very aggressive in our attempts to get as much as possible included in the final text.
Now, Senator Daines joined me earlier this week, and he said, look, the 40% SALT won't work. Maybe we can get a lower SALT and a lower cap on whom is eligible for it. Does the Speaker think that will satisfy his SALT caucus? I
think again, we've been trying to, as much as possible, test the limits, see what the traffic will bear with the SALT caucus. He's got to deliver the votes in the House, and we understand that, and I understand that's a much more difficult issue in the House. But the truth is, at least in the Senate, there isn't a single Senate Republican who cares much about this issue. And frankly, in my view at least, this was one of the better policy reforms in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and that is for the first time, not having low-tax states subsidizing high-tax states. So it was a good policy reform, and we want to keep as much of it as we can. We know in order to get the votes in the House, we're going to have to make a deal there. But it's something that is a political necessity, and that's what's requiring, I think, the Senate to give some ground there. But if it were just left to our own devices, we like the policy right where it is.
What's your level of confidence of a successful vote by July 4, Leader Thune?
I still think we get this done this week. A lot of the voting will happen on Saturday, but at least and we'll see. I mean, we're waiting for all the bird bath rulings, which are taking a lot longer because the Democrats are contesting and challenging pretty much everything. But if we can get this done, it'll be a huge win for the American people. I mean, this is the biggest spending reduction in history, tax relief for working Americans, commitment to energy dominance, modernizing our military, securing our border. This really is the president's agenda encompassed or incorporated into this particular piece of legislation. And I'm hoping that not only can we get Republicans in the House and the Senate to rally behind it, but get it on the president's desk, signed into law, so that the American people who voted for him and voted for this agenda can benefit from it.
Last quick question, Senator Thune. Mr. Mamdani won in New York last night, and Mamdani may not be known to most of this audience, but he's to the left of left. He makes AOC look like, Jim Langford. What do you think that tells us about the Democratic Party?
I think it's scary that this is where their party, the base of their party is right now. This is a guy who is called for the globalization of intifada. I mean, he wants to get rid of the New York police force. I mean, these things are so extreme and so radical. It really tells you where the base of their party is, and hopefully they're way out of touch with where the American people are.
I think they are. Senator John Thune, good luck this weekend and in the next week. I hope we get the big, beautiful bill done, and I appreciate your taking time with me this morning. I was on with Sean Hannity last night as the debate rages over how devastated does devastated mean. The Iranian nuclear weapons program is in pieces. It's shattered. But nobody in legacy media wants to give Donald Trump credit for anything, no matter how obvious it is. I talked about it with Sean last night. Let's play cut number, I don't know what what number is it? It's cut number 21.
Hugh, I agree with the Trump doctrine. I agree that Iran can't have nukes. He took care of that on Saturday night. I agree with part two. I don't want America involved in forever wars, but we're dealing with radicals that believe in a caliphate, which means convert or die. And as of last Friday, they were chanting death to America. I don't think they're going to switch or change their ideology or their thought process. What if they tried to work through those proxies, which is what I suspect they would try to do next?
You know, Sean, I think that President Trump has dealt them such a decisive blow in combination with the Israelis, they're actually going to abandon that. Now, I believe this weekend was a world historical event, changed the trajectory of the West, changed the trajectory of Israel, changed the trajectory of the Middle East and the United States. Decisive win for the president. I also think the Iranian regime is shattered. They lost 6 generals, 14 nuclear scientists, and the Israeli intelligence assessment, not this low-level one that came out of the Department of Defense tonight by anonymous sources. The Israeli intelligence assessment is they've set back the nuclear program several years. That's been backed up by independent analysts like Adam Credo at the Washington Free Beacon, David Albright, many credentialed people. We crushed the Iranian regime. They're on their back. Now, they can do some selfies with damaged buildings in Tel Aviv. They can try and tell their people they won. But this is a country that's collapsing, Sean. 45% GDP decline over a dozen years. This is not a regime that could absorb easily what Donald Trump hit them with over the weekend and what Israel hit them with for 2 weeks. So I think the Trump doctrine is going to stay on the top shelf and in the front of everyone's mind who thinks about getting a nuclear weapon, and that is not going to include Iran. And I was very confident. Sean rightly came right back at me, cut number 22.
So let me be clear. You have a high degree of confidence that Iran has learned their lesson and they won't try to be clever and arm the Houthis or Hamas or Hezbollah and try and use the proxies to attack Israel. You have a high degree of confidence of that.
I do, Sean, and it's because on the first night of the war, I don't know if you ever saw Guardians of the Galaxy, but there was this Yaka missile that Woody Harrelson used to guide around. They used this secret weapon to kill all these nuclear scientists at once. The Iranians are not going to sit with their back to a door or a window for decades. Israel knows everything going on in that country. My degree of confidence is very high. And so I was thus pleased when listening to Dwayne's World by the one and only Generalissimo talking to Jim Talent yesterday, they dialed up this quote from General David Petraeus about damage done to Iran, cut number 19.
Well, first and foremost, the operations by the Israelis and by our American men and women, these have been absolutely superb, very, very impressive indeed. And the fact that they were carried out without any casualties to the forces involved is really nothing short of remarkable. There's no question that there has been very, very significant damage done to all of the known nuclear sites within Iran. And I suspect that this has indeed set the program back much, much more than many months. But the bomb damage assessment process does need to be complete to validate that. And that's a very challenging
So I understand that, but you don't need a lot of brain power to say, well, the Israelis knew where the nuclear scientists were sleeping. They killed them all at once and a half dozen generals to boot, eventually get up to 35 generals, I believe. So the Israeli intel's all over that country, and they assess that the nuclear program has been set back several years. Doesn't mean you can't forget things you've learned, although the smart guys are dead. But I'm very glad you picked up that clip, Generalissimo, and put it into Dwayne's World. And I guess now's the time I'll do my PhD, weightloss.com. That's 864. No, caught him sleeping, didn't I?
644.
1900. 864?
644.
1900. Where did I catch you away from the desk there?
I was talking to Yoni.
Okay, well, 864?
644.
1900 will connect you to myphdweightloss.com, which Dwayne used 2.5 years ago to lose 50 pounds and keep them off. And that allows him to be nimble and to do podcasts like Dwayne's World. Great grab on the David Petraeus quote.
Wasn't that neat?
Dwayne's World.
Yeah, that That sure turned the tables on the Bertrand story in the media narrative, didn't it?
Well, the media narrative isn't going to go anywhere. It's just stupid. And I believe the Israelis. And did you remember? Did you see Guardians of the Galaxy, the Yaka arrow?
Oh, absolutely.
That's what I think the Israelis saw that movie and they said, we need one of those to get 14 nuclear scientists at once.
And not just one.
No, I think they got 12 or 13 or 14 of those things are moving around. And if we had, I don't think we can play it because of copyright, but if you just Google Woody Harrelson Yaka arrow, you'll see what we're talking about, what the Israelis did. I have a very high degree of confidence in Israeli intelligence, very high degree of confidence. And you have a very high degree of confidence in my PhD weight loss?
100%.
Even in times of stress like the Angels being horrible?
If the Angels win no other games but continue to sweep the Boston Red Sox, it's a successful season.
No, I can get all on board with that. I absolutely can. All right, let me move on to another great sponsor of our program, which is besthotgrill.com. And right now, Rhett and Irene are reminding me, regular grills are low power, low heat, and they are low number of years. Besthotgrill.com is high power, high heat. You get that thing to 1,000 degrees in less than a minute. You can have absolutely perfectly done steaks, tasty vegetables, crispy chicken, whatever you want. You can get done because the power in the Solaire Infrared Grill is remarkable. It's that fast. And they don't wear out, right? I suppose they have. I've had them for 7 and 9 years. They haven't worn out. Yours worn out, Dwayne?
No, it doesn't wear out. It just every time I use it, it gets hotter than Khomeini's former IRGC commander.
You don't always have to hit that. You just come say it gets really, really hot. Got to be fast to be good. But made in the USA. Don't buy a cheap one. Don't buy the one that's at the hardware store because it's out front with a sale tag on it. Get yourself a grill that you can use for a long time, like Relief Factor, which I'm about to take now. You'll notice I haven't been particularly mobile today if you're watching on the Salem News Channel because I'm still not particularly mobile, but I got out and around a little bit this morning thanks to Relief Factor, which I'm taking right now if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. And it requires very little effort. That's it. And if you take enough of that, you're able to keep going from early in the morning until late at night, even when you've tweaked something, makes the minor aches and pains go away a lot more quickly. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, omega, 4 natural pills that make up one packet of Relief Factor. You should take it every single day. And when you start the starter pack, $19.95, it's got 3 weeks. You do 3 a day for the first week, 2 a day for the second week, 1 a day for the third week, and then you'll know that it works. Because your tennis elbow, your cap, whatever it is, it'll be gone. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. Or go to their website, relieffactor.com. Find the starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day, at relieffactor.com. My guest is Ty Lassiter. He is CEO of Key City Capital, a great sponsor of my program. I have to do a few disclosures whenever Ty comes on to give us an update on apartment construction in America. I'm an investor in Key City Capital. I am a qualified investor, and you need to be one if you want to invest in one of Ty's funds. You should get the prospectus, read it very carefully before you decide to invest, and understand you cannot get into the fund I got into with my wife 3 years ago because it's closed and they've moved on through 3 or 4 more funds since then. So you can't have what I've got, but they open up a new fund all the time. Ty, good to see you. And yesterday, the National Association of Home Builders came out with a new study that says in the last 10 years, apartment construction has moved dramatically from core urban areas, even beyond the suburbs, out to the exurbs. Have you seen that in your business?
Absolutely. In fact, we've got one of them going right now, and we finished one last year that has been a huge opportunity for us. What we've seen is that with core markets and with businesses being a little bit more flexible, we're seeing the markets that we're in growing significantly, and they cannot sustain the growth of the population. And so they're moving out further and further out. And so we've seen a huge opportunity. We've got a 370 unit development going right now. And that's in a market where we're actually 10,000 units under development right now. So supply is behind demand by 10,000 units. So we are excited to get that one going and get that on the marketplace.
The other thing I learned in this is that the percentage of renters aged 30 or older is now 72%, an all-time high. Have you noticed that older people are picking apartments because that must be good for demand?
It's great for demand, and we are seeing that significantly. What we're seeing is that many of the baby boomers have moved to apartment housing really because of the convenience of it. And so, in fact, our construction manager, our lead construction manager, his in-laws just moved into an apartment right down from where they live. And we're seeing this across the place, across our portfolio. We see a number of tenants that are older than 55 years of age. And that has become very common because of the flexibility and the lack of maintenance that they have to maintain on their own home.
I would also think if people want to avoid skyrocketing insurance costs or weather events, don't own, rent. And if you rent, you want to buy a newer building or one that's been improved. Ty, markets are up at their all-time highs again. Gold was up over 3,400 because of the scare in the Middle East. It's now quieted down. What is the investment interest in Key City Capital right now?
Well, we're seeing a huge investment interest because Morningstar just came out with a report recently that real estate is at the top of performing investment classes right now. It's the number 2 behind small cap stocks. It provides huge volatility protection against the stock market. And we know with everything that's going on from the Middle East and from everything that's going on in the economy right now and the tariffs and everything else, that our stock market has been more volatile than ever. And in fact, real estate has had 69% less volatility over the last 20 years than the equities market and the stock market. And so many of our investors are looking to capitalize on that. They're taking advantage of the earnings that they've seen of the skyrocketing stock market right now. And they're taking some chips off the table and they're putting it into more diversified and less volatile markets, specifically real estate, because of how real estate's performing. And we're coming out of a reset. And if you remember back from the '08 reset, within 2 years, we got back to where we were and really exceeded beyond that. We're seeing that happen right now. I think in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see a huge opportunity that's just going to drop off the table. And so for people that don't jump in right now, they wait 6 to 12 months, they are going to miss out on that opportunity.
So to invest with Key City Capital, go to keycitycapital.com/Hugh. Have to be a qualified investor. Minimum investment is $100,000, six figures, though they go much higher than that. So Ty, very quickly, where is the current fund focused?
Our current fund is focused on right now the Dallas market. We've got 3 assets that we're focusing on. 2 of them are in the Dallas market. 1 of them is in Tennessee, and we're buying those with really, really low debt right now. We're using less than 50% leverage on the property. And in fact, one of the properties we're buying all cash. And what that's going to do is that's going to generate cash flow to our investors, which is one of the important things that they look for is cash flow. And so that's what we're focused on right now and can't wait to get that done. So we've got about $4 million of availability left on those 3 assets, and we're looking to close that by mid-July. So take advantage right now of that $4 million window that we have.
I'm glad you mentioned that because there's no guarantee that if you want to invest and you hear this, if you call up Ty, that the fund, someone won't write him a $4 million check and it'll be closed. But you can go to keycitycapital.com/Hugh or give Ty and his team a call at Key City Capital. Thank you, Ty. Mary Catherine Ham is one of the normies I love to talk to. She is the host of Getting Hammered. Had an episode last week, a bonus episode right before Donald Trump blew up 3 different facilities. Mary Catherine, first and most important question, Dave Barry's coming up today. Do you like Dave Barry?
I love Dave Barry. How could you not?
Well, I was wondering because he thinks you're out of his demo. I think that kind of he thinks he's out of it now, and I don't think he is. I think he could continue writing that column. You know, he quit 10 years ago. But if he picked it up tomorrow, it would be immediate.
No, I read his most recent novel, was it 2 summers ago? Swamp Story, when I was in Italy on vacation. So it was fantastic.
It's brand new. He just wrote a memoir called Class Clown, which is hilarious. And he'll be coming up later in the program. I think he's perfect I learned in the book that he's friends with Steve Martin. I think he's also played a corpse. Dave Barry has played a corpse in an opera. So I think Dave Barry would be an excellent cameo on Only Murders in the Building. What do you think?
Ooh, I like it. Yes, let's make it happen.
All right, let's get to serious stuff. Do you believe the anonymous officials at the DIA who talked to CNN, or do you believe Israeli intelligence who had the address and bedroom of every nuclear scientist in Iran?
Yeah, here's the thing. This is what happens with Natasha Bertrand, the CNN reporter, and the intelligence community when something like this comes across my desk, is that I remember the past. And I remember whether she's been accurate about things in the past. And I remember that she likes people to leak things to her selectively that fit her narrative, which just always happens to be anti-Donald Trump, right? So I just think those facts are pertinent here, and that there's a whole constellation of assessments that we're going to get, including in Israeli intelligence assessments. And Israeli intelligence has been spot on when it comes to—
Yes, they have.
In the last couple months, like 30 generals dead at this point. Like, they know what's happening there.
Yeah, and there's something called SIGINT and HUMANINT, and then there's a different kind of int that I can't remember. And the Israelis have every int possible on this, and they've already set back several years. But to return to the said reporter, is she a mark or is she complicit, in your opinion?
I think she's like ideologically complicit with the idea of going after Donald Trump. I mean, like, I don't like to question people's motives, but if the pattern is there, you have to look at it and go, I think she gets fed stuff that is partial story. And when she sees the partial story that she likes, she says, that's enough. That's all I need. They hate context when context might work against the tiny bit of intel they have gotten leaked. That's how Russiagate worked. They were like, oh, we've got this tiny piece of evidence that we've decided means this. And they jumped to all the conclusions without rounding out the story. And then, the story turns out not to be true at all.
Do you think it matters at all at this point? Because it's made Trump mad. It's made a lot of people inside the Pentagon mad. But I don't think it matters, because if they destroyed the nuke program or set it back for years and years, they've done that. And it doesn't really matter what's on CNN, because no one's watching CNN anyway, and this particular reporter is starting from behind the line of scrimmage way back there.
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I think it's a Rorschach test in which people who are dead set against Donald Trump will assume that what she's saying is correct and that there's no other way of looking at it. And most other people will be like, I don't know, a bunch of 30,000-pound bombs probably did quite a bit of damage under the ground where they're supposed to be doing the damage, and buried a lot of things under that damage. I would say, from the administration's point of view, as you point out, no one's watching. There's no need to be all mad about this. Just say we have the intelligence. Hush.
Yeah, that's it. I hope they do that. Now, I need your comment on New York City. I know you love New York. You go up to New York a lot. I try to avoid New York for my whole life. I only had to live there once. Mr. Mamdani is going to be the mayor, and he is way to the left of AOC. And he does not like Jews very much. What do you think?
Yeah, this is sad. I do like New York. I like visiting New York. I like visiting LA. They're sort of insane, exciting places that I wish for better leadership for both of them. And Mamdani, look, this is what you got to learn in politics. Anybody who can talk is dangerous. Anybody who can brand themselves cleverly is dangerous. This guy showed an ability to do that and to be good on camera, and people started listening to him. What I think is interesting about him is he's like a luxury belief candidate, right? He's a rich kid who's a socialist, and he's attracted a bunch of white, affluent, college-educated liberals to vote for the dream of socialism in New York City, while people of color and working class and middle class folks are like, no, we'll take the establishment creep because we're afraid of government-run grocery stores, because he didn't learn that lesson in the 80s at some point. It's really shocking that people fall for this, but I guess the pitch of like, hey, I smile a lot and be on TV and tell you'll get all sorts of free things isn't a terrible pitch. It's just that the people who the free things are supposed to be for, they weren't interested. They were interested in a different guy. If I were a New Yorker, I'd be clinging, as my friend Carol Markowitz says, clinging to Eric Adams for all I'm worth.
Well, that's it. Now, the funeral episode of commentary today left me feeling bad for everyone in New York because they're kind of resigned to going to hell. They're resigned to L.A. at its worst, to Blade Runner, that sort of thing. They don't think it can be stopped. And then Matt Continetti says, "Well, what about Eric Adams?" They almost shouted him down because Eric Adams is so bad. But do you think maybe normal New York rallies to Eric Adams?
I mean, when you have a socialist on the ballot, maybe Eric Adams starts to look a lot better. Like it's all relativism, right? Andrew Cuomo didn't deserve a comeback. He deserved to be humiliated. I enjoy that as a byproduct of this, but I genuinely worry about the city, especially if you look at what Mamdani wants to do with education, which is remove all the gifted programs, take away things like, oh, I don't know, tests and scores and any sort of metric that you use that wouldn't be his word inclusionary. I think that's going to hurt a bunch of kids. It's going to hurt education at large in New York City, and I think just they're going to pay a price. Regular folks are going to pay a price for this. His
Okay,
little
write it down, Mary
intellectual
Catherine. Write it down. He's going to win, and then he's going to run for president, despite the fact that AOC is going to run for president, and Ro Khanna. That party's gone over the cliff, and I don't. Do you agree with me? They've gone Thelma and Louise.
Yeah, I think his name ID is going to be super high. His ability to raise money is going to be super high. He's living the dream that all the white affluent liberals with lots of college education want to live of socialism, which doesn't make any sense, but they will throw money at him, which means it will make him competitive. That's where the energy is. It's on the left. It's halfway over the cliff, as you say, throwing money back up the cliff, and everybody's just following the money down.
Oh, Mary Catherine M., we're going to have fun with him. Mr. Mamdani. I got to say his name right first, but I got yours to practice. MK Hammer on Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, House Ways and Means Chairman Jason Smith will fill us in on what he's hearing from the House. He's chairman of Ways and Means, so he's hearing a lot. He's one of the negotiators that they're trying to get to a bill that can be passed out of the Senate and quickly passed by the House. That's easier said than done. I do want to tell everyone out there that I have made the switch to consumer cellular. All right, so you need to go and do me one favor. Look at your cell phone bill. All right, maybe you pay automatic, so you never see it. But I'm asking you, go online if you have to and pull up your cell phone bill and see how much you're paying. Because you don't have to sacrifice service for savings. You can have both savings and service with consumer cellular. I have made the switch. I want you to consider it. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. Use the promo code Hugh25 if you're doing this online, because then you'll get $5 off each of your first 5 monthly invoices. Keep your number, keep your data, keep everything, or get a new device, new data, new everything. But what I want you to do is get a new cost, which will be lower. Now, why is that? Because you have no idea what you're paying for your cell phone. Almost certainly you do not know. And I know you feel guilty about that driving around right now. Don't feel guilty about it. Nobody knows. That's how big cellular makes the big bucks. They don't want you to know. They don't want you to shop. I do. I want you to call Consumer Cellular 800-411-4454, 1-800-441-4454, and say, what can you do for me? And they're going to say, what are you paying right now? And you're not going to know. So look it up first. You can call them up, and I can guarantee you if you want unlimited cell for whatever reason and you're over 50, the very best deal you're going to find in the world is Consumer Cellular. 2 lines for $60 a month, right? Unlimited data. So if you're an unlimited data, nervous Nelly, you don't want to get charged for data, do that. But if you're only using 5 gigs, 10 gigs, get one of the low gig plans and save yourself a lot more money. But you can only find out how much you're going to save if you call them 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. And my code is Hugh25, or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Now, I was on Sean Hannity last night, and they did a commercial on Sean Hannity, and I thought to myself, well, lots of people must be making the switch to Consumer Cellular. Even more will be making the switch if you will just go and look at your bill. All right, look at your bill, find out what you're paying for. It's not meant to be very transparent, so you might have to get your pencil out, study what it is exactly you're buying and what you're paying, then call Consumer Cellular and get out of that plan and get into a new plan with consumercellular.com/Hugh. When I come back, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start with Jason Smith. The one big beautiful bill needs to get through the House and hopefully onto the President's desk by July 4th. And then Dan Senor is going to join me on the most amazing 3 weeks in Middle East history since the massacre, and maybe among the most important periods in Israeli history and American history ever. Thunder and lightning across the Beltway, but hopefully not between the Senate and the House. I began the program talking to Majority Leader Thune. I'm pleased to begin this hour by talking to the Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee Representative Jason Smith of Missouri. Mr. Chairman, welcome back. How are you?
Doing well. It's great to be with you as always, Hugh.
Well, tell me how go the negotiations. Leader Thune sounded pretty optimistic about the Senate working all weekend and getting a bill.
First off, I appreciate how determined that Senator Thune is in making sure that they're going to work until they get the bill across the finish line over in the United States Senate. Of course, what they pass needs to be very well balanced, and they need to thread that needle. I've been working constantly with my counterpart, Chairman Mike Crapo, also with Leader Thune, to make sure that they understand some of the very touchy issues within the House of Representatives. We passed that over the next several days, working with the Senate, that we'll be able to move this bill to more of a balanced approach, that when the Senate passes it, that hopefully we could just pick it up and pass it. But if not, we'll go to conference quickly, because we have to have it on the President's desk by July 4th.
Mr. Chairman, it's Dwayne in Hugh's office. Hugh had a little power outage in the Beltway where his studio's at. There's been lightning in the area, and so we expect to be joining him again shortly. I want to pick up on where Hugh left off, and I want to know if the bill that we think is going to emerge out of the Senate, which I agree, I think it should be in a form that the majority of the members in your conference can probably get to a yes on. How much pre-conferencing is going on between you and the Senate if you have to go to a conference committee? If this does have to ping pong back, once or twice more, how much pre-conferencing has been going on about the contentious points between you and your counterparts in the Senate?
The legislation, also some of the trade provisions, and we're talking almost daily. And what are those touchy points? And so we're well attuned, and we're both determined to get this done. Chairman Crapo's doing a phenomenal job. I'm proud of him, and he has been a great ally to work with.
So let's cover the key points of contention and kind of estimate where it's going to happen and where this could logistically go. The Senate's version seems to be on the SALT issue, the state and local tax issue. The Senate was initially offering back 10. Is their bill going to keep it at 10, or is it going to come up from there?
So the Senate number of 10, from what I've been told, is just a placeholder. 10 could never pass the House of Representatives. That's what it currently is. Of course, in the House, we can only lose 1.4% of our body. The Senate can lose 6% of their body. If they would leave it at 10,000, there's no way that we would have the votes. And so that is one of those items that we have to have real balance in. We struck a very good balance within the House bill that got it across the finish line. The issue is we have House members from SALT states, such as New York, California, sure, New Jersey. However, there are not any Republican senators from SALT states. So it's not nearly as big as a priority to the Senate, but it is important to the Senate that we can get 218 votes in the House and they can get 51 in the Senate. And so that's why we have to thread the needle very carefully on the state and local tax deduction, but it's also the green credits. The green credits is another area that you have some people that want to rip out at the roots all of the green credits and others that want to use a scalpel approach. we have to balance. And that's why I continue to say that over and over, thread the needle and balance appropriately.
Mr. Chairman, it's Hugh. I'm back. Sorry about that. The lightning strike was direct, but we scrambled. So I missed what you told Dwayne. So I want to go to what you were saying in that last answer, thread the needle. Leader Thune told me he's talking to Speaker Johnson continually. So how much threading is left to do?
We've been working hand in glove, Hugh. My counterpart, Chairman Crapo, we've been working together for months on this. When you look at just from the tax perspective of this bill, 90% we completely agree on. So it's roughly about 10%. The issue is we can't allow the provisions within the 10% to be those poison pills. And some of those poison pills is a state and local tax deduction that has to be done right. And also the green credits and the Medicaid reforms. Those are very sensitive areas that have to be done with balance, understanding the makeup of the US Senate, but also the makeup of the House of Representatives. And then we also have a fairly large challenge with our debt and deficit hawks, both in the House and both in the Senate, in making sure that we strike a very appropriate balance that's acceptable for all of them. We're going to do it. Failure's not an option. We're going to do it. We're pretty close. In the next 5 days, we'll be there by the time that they take up the bill and pass it off the floor in the United States Senate.
You know, it would be an enormous win for the economy if you can get this done by July 4, Mr. Chairman. Do you think it will be done by July 4?
I do. I've been pushing it aggressively since July 4th. This is what the president's called for. We passed the bill out of the House before Memorial Day with 4 or 5 days to spare. It's been over in the Senate. The Senate's going to deliver that bill this week. I just hope that this bill's very well balanced, so it's something that we can pick up and pass and put directly on the president's desk. If not, we'll go to conference and we'll do that quickly to make sure it gets on the president's desk.
Well, isn't there a sort of conference underway right now so that while the parliamentarian makes a ruling, that gets rolled into the negotiations and then the negotiations roll back in the parliamentary? Is that what's happening, a rolling card game right now?
You could definitely say that, but that's been the process for weeks now with negotiating with our counterparts and trying to figure out what are those touchy points throughout the process. Like you pull this domino away, how many will fall here? Because when you tinker with the tax code, it can have some major consequences. So we're trying to be very thoughtful and deliberative. And we've been doing that. So I guess you could say that we're kind of conferencing out right now because we're constantly communicating with one another and we're walking hand in glove.
Now, in the House bill, the small businesses were going to get a hike from a 20% pass-through to a 23% pass-through. Senator Crapo's bill had it back to 20%. Is that an area where you have to compromise, or have you given that up?
I have not given it up. I feel like that increasing the pass-through deduction from 20 to 23 was something that helped give more parity for pass-through corporations, subchapter S's, LLCs to that of C corporations. And it is something that I think is still on the table over in the Senate. Well, I know without a doubt it's still on the table over in the Senate. It was an important priority to the House of Representatives. That's why we did that. We wanted to make sure this bill was targeting and focused on producing real tax relief for small businesses, working families, and farmers. That provision is extremely important to small businesses and farmers.
What about the revenue enhancers, like the sale of public lands? The sale of new spectrum matters to a lot of people. Retirement account rules changes. Are there revenue enhancers in here that are not tax hikes?
Yeah, there's several different revenue raisers in there that aren't tax hikes. And one that we had in the House bill that's not currently in the Senate bill, which raised about $40 billion in revenue, is the president's de minimis proposal. And that is something that would have a pretty big impact for U.S. companies from that sense. Plus, it would save $40 billion. And then you could look at some of the reforms that we added to the child tax credit program, of requiring Social Security numbers for the child and the parents, which we did in the House bill. That saves like 25 to 30 billion dollars in child tax credits that were spent improperly. But the Social Security number would straighten that out.
Please keep fighting the good fight. I know you are. Thank you for your patience with Washington, D.C. area weather as well. And good luck on getting this done by July 4th. Chairman Jason Smith of Missouri, Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, I appreciate it. Dan Senor hosts the Call Me Back podcast, which has been indispensable since 10/7, and especially in the last 3 weeks. He joins us now. Dan, where do we find you today?
Chicago, Illinois.
Okay, you're always somewhere not near your home, so I'm glad we find you in Chicago. Dan, I'm just going to start neutral. What is Dan Senor's assessment of where we are now versus 3 weeks ago?
Look, Hugh, I gave a speech about 6 weeks ago in which I quoted our friends. I know you're a fan of Lord Andrew Roberts, the British historian, and Neil Ferguson, who basically said that there's no country in the last couple hundred years you can point to that has faced the kind of threats Israel has faced and achieved the kind of geopolitical, I won't say hegemony, but definitely geopolitical strength that has come out of in such a short period of time, in about 19, 20 months. That was about 6, 7 weeks ago. I'd say in the last 3 weeks, it's gotten even better. Here's what we know from Israel's perspective. The biggest threat to Israel and to most of the Sunni Gulf, for that matter, most of the Middle East, was Iran. It was the head of the snake. In the last 13, 14 days, 15 days now, we know the following. One, Iran doesn't have much of a conventional military to point at that poses a threat to Israel. It's relied on a proxy system of all these proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, satellite states like the Assad regime in Syria. All of those are gone or severely weakened. Hezbollah and Nasrallah, as we know, are gone. Hamas is severely weakened. The Houthis are a nuisance, but they don't pose a real strategic threat. The Assad regime that's been in power for 53 years is now gone. Iran has no air defenses. Its nuclear program, at worst, is severely set back, and I think it's in much worse shape than that for Iran. It's under some kind of internal pressure. Remains to be seen what. So, and Israel and the U.S. have demonstrated to the region that they're willing to work together to roll back serious threats to the West. So I just think if you think about the pressure Israel was under on October 7th, when there was the sense that it was a paper tiger, I have not seen Israel transform its position in the Middle East in any war in its history. You'd have to go back to the Six-Day War in 1967 to find something comparable.
And I believe that it's a world historical event for the United States to intervene in the development of nuclear weapons by a power that does not possess them and say no. And that if that Trump doctrine is honored into the future, we will all be better off, but it was honored in the beginning right over this weekend. Let's go to that. Somehow Trump derangement syndrome gets hold of some people, and no matter what he does, it's got to be incomplete or bad or poorly executed. So they got these 3 anonymous people at the Pentagon to say, well, we don't think it was so bad. Israeli intelligence says, you set it back years. Israeli intelligence is the intelligence that picked off 14 nuclear scientists in their beds and 35 generals. And I'm going to trust the IC in Israel more than I trust the DIA. Are you where I am on that?
Totally, Hugh. But before we even get to that, just think about the following. Just for simplicity's sake, if you think what's necessary to build a real nuclear weapons program, what do you need? You need the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure to enrich the uranium and build all the other ingredients. 2, you need the ingredients. And 3, you need the expertise. You need the know-how. So here's what we know. As you just said, much of the expertise has been wiped out. Israel has been systematically taking out these scientists and other experts. People say you can't bomb knowledge away. You absolutely can. These nuclear programs depend on scientific experts. If you take those scientists, those physicists, and you remove them from the planet, Iran doesn't have that expertise anymore. A. B. We know the infrastructure. Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan were hit hard, and so their infrastructure it's not so easy to climb into those places anymore, if at all, to work at them. The one question is whether or not the 400 plus kilograms of enriched uranium is somewhere, that they've lost track of. I'm not certain that they've lost track of it, but even if they have, you still are missing those two other components. So just as a practical level, it's hard to believe that Iran's nuclear program isn't at a minimum set back years. Now it comes to the point you made, which is the essential point. The U.S. intelligence community has exceptional intelligence capabilities all over the world. One area that the intelligence community here will often tell you where they have a big gap is in Iran, in terms of their capabilities on the ground in Iran. So much so that that the U.S. has been dependent on Israeli intelligence for years and years and years. Iran has been crawling with Mossad agents over the last God knows how long. That's why the operation that Israel conducted and ultimately the U.S. conducted was so effective. So, to your point, relying on these DIA analysts who, it's not exactly clear what they leaked, by the way. Did they leak the actual intelligence to CNN, or did they leak their interpretation of the intelligence? And there's a lot of theories as to, even if they got some intelligence that they're interpreting, there's a whole range of interpretations that we could get into that was not reflected in the CNN report. I thought the CNN report was shockingly, maybe I shouldn't be shocked, but shockingly irresponsible without providing all the proper context. And as the Israelis and the Americans, the U.S. administration have been saying, Israel's actually on the ground. We've been depending on Israeli intelligence. If you had any doubt how effective Israeli intelligence was, look what we just accomplished, we, the U.S. and Israel. So everyone should just take a deep breath.
Dan, I don't know if you're a Guardians of the Galaxy fan, but I was on Sean Hannity's show last night, and I said the Israelis obviously saw that when Woody Harrelson used the Yaka arrow, which was the little red arrow that went everywhere and killed everyone all at once, and they used that on the first night of the war. So I'm just going to trust the Israelis on what they say, and I don't think they're going to lie to us. Next question. I had Yossi Klein-Halevi. By the way, great pickup for ARC Media to have Yossi and Daniel. I listened to him anyway. Now they're, for heaven's sake, gets your distribution network. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
The overwhelming feeling in Israel is exhaustion and gratitude that it's over. Do you share Yossi's view of that? That it's, thank God, we can't keep going to the shelters every night.
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. First of all, I haven't seen an issue in Israel in a long time that has had this kind of consensus in terms of support across the political spectrum. Even those who are fierce critics of Netanyahu in Israel are supportive of what this government has been doing, and the IDF and the intelligence community in Israel have been doing in Iran. So there's broad support for it and deep support for it. That said, it's exhausting. I mean, I spoke to my sister yesterday who lives in Jerusalem, and she said, I said, she's describing their lives. I said, it sounds like COVID. And she says, no, it's actually worse than COVID. She goes, because with COVID, at least, we couldn't be in buildings with other people, according to the restrictions, but we could be out, we could go on a hike, we go on a bike ride, you could be outside. She says, this constant barrage of missiles against Israel means you always got to kind of stay near a structure, a building, a garage, your apartment. So it's actually even more confining. And I think that is exhausting. And, Israelis want it to be done, but Israelis are also resilient. I think what's more difficult is what we've learned over the last 24 hours, that Israel just lost another 7 soldiers who were fighting in Gaza, which is just gut-wrenching. And so the kind of unfinished business, if you will, in Gaza, I think is truly exhausting. Keep in mind, over 300,000 Israelis have been serving in these, what they call Miluim, the reserves, and that's just as a percentage of Israel's population. It's like World War II levels of
I get it, because I listen to Call Me Back, and I want to encourage everyone in this audience to find, like, and subscribe to Call Me Back. It is the absolute necessary podcast on all things Israel for the last year and a half. Dan Senor, thank you. Follow Dan on X at Dan Senor. Listen to everything from ARC Media, starting with Call Me Back. Still have power. The storm has passed. When you're under one of these supercells in Virginia, it can be a wild rodeo, but it's gone now to bother the people on the other side of the river. So I am going to get to dinner tonight with the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC.org. Now, ALEC.org has been a sponsor of mine for a lot of years. You hear John Williams and you hear all sorts of people from ALEC on the program all the time because they're smart, they're nonpartisan, they're objective. I love their lists. I love side-by-side comparisons of the 50 states. And they're so professional and so absolutely on top of everything. That's why 500 legislators signed a letter to Congress organized by the American Legislative Exchange Council, alec.org/Hugh, if you want to see it, to Congress. 500 state legislators saying extend the 2017 Jobs and Tax Cut Act. And they're going to. We talked to Leader Thune today, talked to Jason Smith today. It's going to happen. There are some hard swaps that got to be made. They're 90% of the way there. The last 10% is the hardest road to walk. But what ALEC does is not only let members of Congress know what members of the state legislature do, they keep track of important issues like in New Hampshire, which already has quite an advantage over every other New England state, and that has no sales tax. They've now just given universal education freedom. And by given, I mean they've just recognized that education, to the extent that it's a civil right, ought to be bound up with education choice. In the bad old days, before civil rights came to the United States for our black American friends and neighbors, they could not enter the schoolroom door because of segregation. Now they can't get out of the school. They're locked into public school even if they're failing. So the civil rights issue of our time is school choice. In New Hampshire, just became the 17th state with universal school choice. Kelly Ayotte signed, she's the governor for the Steelers fans. She used to be a senator, so don't get confused. Now Governor Ayotte signed SB 295 yesterday, which provides universal education accounts regardless of income level, starts in July of this year. They were a key target state and the latest victory in the ALEC JCN Prosperity Partnership, Unleash Prosperity. They're both sponsors, the American Legislative Exchange Council Job Credit Network, and they're doing God's work when it comes to education choice. Bravo. Looking forward to talking with my ALEC friends tonight. Now, let me check the markets. Brought to you by American Federal, different sponsor. American Federal buys and sells gold. I told you yesterday you might want to buy on the dip, but I doubt anyone was in a position to do so. That's sort of right. I don't ever give investment advice. I'm kind of joking. I just kind of let you know when I think something's weird. Gold's back up to $3,347 an ounce today. That's up $13. It had gone from 3,404 to 3,035, and that was over 2 days, and that just reflected volatility in the international marketplaces. Well, now I think it's settling into where it's going to stay for at least a while. But I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet. And I don't make predictions. I do believe in diversification. I do believe if you're going to buy gold, do it with Nick Rovich and American Federal. American Federal's been in this business for 43 years. Nick founded the firm. He works with his friends. He hand selects the people he works with. You can call him at 800-221-7694. 800-221-7694. Or go to AmericanFederal.com. Talk to them about a gold buying plan, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually. Small, regular purchases, one large purchase. Some of you want to sell gold, and Nick will do that with you as well. But you got to call him first at 1-800-221-7694. The market today. S&P flat. Nothing changed. NASDAQ up about 1/3 of a point. Dow down about 1/4 of a point. What matters the most, West Texas crude, $65.22 a barrel. Brent crude at $64.79 a barrel. That means oil continues to drop. The world is assessed, not what the DIA thinks, but the world is assessed that Iran is on its back flat as a pancake. And that they're not going to be making a lot of, doesn't mean that they're going to have regime change. No one's asking for that. Just means they're shattered. The regime is shaky, doesn't know what it's going to do. People have their eyes open, and Donald Trump has his eye open more than anyone. Cut number 15, Donald Trump at the NATO presser talking with CNN's Caitlin Collins. Cut number 15.
Please, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, fake news CNN? Oh, yeah, here we go. Wait till you hear this question.
Thank you, sir.
You should really say how great our soldiers and our warriors are.
I think everyone appreciates our soldiers and our warriors. I do.
I'm glad to hear that from Caitlin. That was the right way to say that. I think I would have said, You're absolutely right, Mr. President. We do appreciate our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. Now my question, and instead of everybody, CNN does it. It's so easy to do. I should do media training for CNN. Selena Zito joins me, Washington Post columnist, author of the forthcoming book, Butler, which is going to be a big bestseller. Selena, since I last spoke to you, you got quite the blurb from the President of the United States on Truth Social. My first question is, can they stop the presses, redo the cover, and put the Truth Social on the back of Butler?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's already printed. But there is a very nice endorsement of the book from the president on the back cover. So we're solid.
Well, that was quite the truth post that he put up for you. I think every author was envious of you. Even if they don't like Trump and his politics, they know what that does for book sales. So that's a great way for Butler to get going. Now, before I get to serious stuff, I want to ask you, we are in the middle of a series of just absolute granite-breaking storms in the Beltway. I've been through Warren, Ohio storms, Ann Arbor, Michigan storms, lots of storms in Maine and New York. California doesn't really have storms. But I think Beltway storms are the worst. Where do you think the worst storms have been in your life?
The worst storms I've been in terms of like thunder and lightning and all that. I mean, there's been some pretty nasty ones in Appalachia, right? Because of the topography, where those creeks, or as we say around here, those cricks, and it's always the people that are the poorest that live next to the creek, right? It's the people with money that live on the top of the hill, and they're just devastating. There was just one in Wheeling last week that I just went and toured. I mean, 8 people, they haven't completely identified if the last person has passed or not. She's 83 years old. She's been missing. 9 people have lost their lives, including a 3-year-old girl.
I wholly missed this story, Selena. I don't know anything about this story. When did it happen? Did it happen during the war?
It happened last Saturday.
That's why I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Everything was the war. That was the day after.
Yeah. And it's just, I have a piece up about it on the Washington Examiner. I was there with Governor Morrissey touring the region. But it was unbelievable, like dozens and dozens of cars, underwater, people trapped, people swam out to, they got swept away by their cars. They're holding onto trees, to street lights. It was absolutely, an entire apartment building collapsed, but people came together. I mean, Fairmont State opened up their dorms for the people who lost their homes in the apartment buildings, and the outpouring of community in that area. And as you and I both know, it's like right in the middle of where you and I grew up.
I have to go read that story in the Examiner. I missed it completely, and I will get to that. But now I want to turn to you as the muse of Middle America. When you look at what New York City did last night, elect as the Democratic nominee, Mr. Zoran Mamdani, you can't get further to the left unless you're a communist. And he's got some policies which are not Soviet. He's not a Stasi agent, but, government-run grocery stores. That doesn't work, Selena. What does it tell you about the Democrat Party?
Well, what it tells you, well, first of all, we always know in a primary, whether it's a Republican or Democrat primary, the furthest left or the furthest right show up. And it was out of 8 million people that could possibly vote, 400,000 people put him into office. So it tells you the most energized and the most wanting change were the people that are the furthest left in their party. And it was also a repudiation of Cuomo. If he ever needed to be told, you're not wanted anymore, we were unhappy with what you did, we lost our grandparents to what you did. So it was also a rejection of Cuomoism, right? That arrogant, I know better than you kind of attitude was completely rejected. And that was largely his entire last bit of his term when it came to COVID. He knew everything better than you did.
So do you think that Eric Adams is running as an independent. Curtis Silva is a friend of mine, and I've known him forever, and Curtis was running on the Republican ticket. But if Curtis were persuaded that his dropping out would work for the benefit of the city, he would do it. Do you think Eric Adams can actually rally common sense, center left, center right, and middle people to save the city? This will be a nightmare for New York if this guy gets to be mayor.
It will be a nightmare, and we've seen this coming within the party. I saw it in my own city in Pittsburgh, where a series of people that were members of the Democrat Socialist Party won, congressional seats and House seats and or mayor's offices and county executive offices. This is what happens in these primaries. And it shows you how far left the party has gone when you take it, strip it down to just who shows up in a Democratic primary. But Adams certainly has a chance. He does actually have a good story to tell economically. He has a good story to tell in terms of of how he's handled the migration problem, the immigration problem. But the left is coming for him, man. They are totally coming for him, and he is an old-fashioned, like you and I grew up with, Democrat, right?
Well, I think he just runs on. I'm not a communist. If he just runs on that, I'm not a communist, he might win. Do you think he's got enough chutzpah to do it that way? I'm not a communist, and I like Jews.
I covered him in 4 years ago, and I came back from New York, for the New York Post, and I'm like, he's going to win this because he knows how to show up, right? And he knows how to bridge a lot of different ideologies because he can speak from a bunch of different ones. So the challenge is, can he be out at Eric Adams by this young man? One of the things that he did well was show up and he talked to the media all the time. Well, Adams can do that too, and he can do it effectively. I think that's where his chance stands.
I hope you go back to New York and write this up, because if Mamdani actually wins, he's going to run for president, and I would not. Sort of like the Barack Obama, I've been here for 2 years, now I'm running. Like he did in the Senate, he will do from the Big Apple, and this time, unlike Blumenthal, he'll do very well. Selena Zito, thank you for being here. Follow Selena on X at Zito Selena. Go get her book, Butler, the one that the President of the United States likes so much. And then everything Selena is at selenazito.com. Donald Trump, earlier today, in an availability with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, here he is talking about Iran's nuclear program post-bombing, cut number 3.
Do you think that the Iranian nuclear program has been put back by these strikes? Years or totally?
I think basically decades, because I don't think they'll ever do it again. I just don't think they're going to. I think they're going to take their oil. They're going to have some missiles, and they'll have some defense. I think they've had it. I mean, they just went through hell. I think they've had it. The last thing they want to do is enrich. They've been trying to do it. By the way, it's hard to enrich. And, when you look at a site like that, very, very hard to build. Very, very hard, very expensive. They spent trillions of dollars trying to do this thing, and they didn't come up with it. Had we not succeeded with that hit ended the war. That hit ended the war. If we didn't take that out, they'd be fighting right now.
And Marco Rubio gets into it with the media as well, at the same availability with the Secretary General of NATO and the President. Here's the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, cut number 6. Illegal and criminal, but also effective if you get some lunatic to go along with you who's got a platform. Relief factor. This is my empty bag because I took it. If you were watching on the Salem News Channel, you saw me take it on the first hour of the program. I remind you every hour, no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're going and how much you're moving, you want relief factor in your system. Why? Because it makes whatever you do better and easier to do. Minor aches and pains go away. And when you do something ridiculous like I did a week ago, tomorrow, lift the wrong box of books the wrong way, and you throw out your back, relief factor gets you back in the game in a hurry. And I'll be going out tonight and sitting down with my friends from ALEC, and I'll sit kind of carefully and I won't be jumping up and down to applaud the speakers much, but I don't do that anyway. I am here to tell you, Relief Factor works. You should try it. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800-4-RELIEF. Or go to their website, find the starter pack, $19.95, 3-week supply. That's less than $1 a day. 3 a day for the first week, 2 a day for the second week, 1 a day for the third week, and you will feel great, and you'll thank me. That's at relieffactor.com. Go there right now to relieffactor.com. That's a little bit of an unusual opening, but it's because my next guest, Dave Barry, loves Neil Diamond so much, and in particularly this song, that I wanted to welcome him with that in the hopes that he'll be easier on me than every other comic and funny person I've ever had on the show. Hello, Dave Barry. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Hugh. It's good to be here. Thank you. And thanks for riling up the Neil Diamond fans as if they didn't hate me enough already.
Well, I've got a lot of people to rile up, but I got to tell you, around here, you're known as Medusa because the one time I met you was at the St. Paul Convention of the Republicans in 2012, which I doubt you remember, but you introduced me to, Lilacs introduced me to you, and I turned to stone except for the gibberish part, so I hope you've forgotten that completely.
I can't imagine that you would have ever turned to stone, Hugh. But I remember that party at Lilacs' house, and I think I do remember meeting you. So, and it was the high point of my life. It was very
forgetful. It was it's up there with your meeting with George, with Barbara Bush, not George Bush. She's not in the book, but I think your Barbara Bush exam. I have 5 categories of things to talk to you about, Dave. I've got things I didn't know that I learned in your new book, Class Clown. Things that disappointed me and shocked me in Class Clown. Things that made me spit out my coffee in Class Clown. Questions I need answer after reading Class Clown, and then something we like to call here potpourri. But I do say, every time I've interviewed funny people, it's gone bad. Harry Shearer, Tracy Ullman, Tim Conway. Carol Burnett was okay, but she had a memoir. So I'm hoping that you fall somewhere in the manageable.
I think I may be wrong, but I think like all of those people are now dead. Is that? It's like.
I don't wish you any harm. I don't wish you any harm.
Okay, I'm a little worried now about this. Okay.
It's a very fabulous book. And Frank Luntz says the rule of 7 is you've got to say the title 7 times. Class Clown is for everybody, and you will spit out your coffee, and you want to go. Let me begin with things I didn't know. Your dad went to Oberlin. So did my dad and brother. I'm just curious, what year did your dad get out of Oberlin?
It would have been around he was born in 1917, so around 1937, 38, something like that. How about your dad?
He's a little bit older than my dad, so they would not have crossed paths. Have you ever visited Oberlin? Did you apply to Oberlin?
I did not, but my sister actually attended it for approximately 27 minutes and I drove her there. So I have been on the campus of Oberlin, but I was determined not to go to Oberlin just because everybody in my dad's family did, and my sister went there very, very briefly. Didn't work out for her.
Well, I went there in the 60s when my brother went there, and at the age of like 14 decided, I'm not coming here. This is a strange place. So I also was surprised to learn that you have Congressional Quarterly on your resume. That is usually an ironclad indication of dull. You know that, don't you? Congressional Quarterly is like dull.
And it was like very determinedly dull. And I was like an office boy basically, and I didn't get to write for them, which was fine because, as you say, it wasn't like exciting writing. But I did have a press pass, and this back in the 60s when there wasn't a whole lot of security on Capitol Hill. And so like my job was really to roam the Capitol, and I got very good at, I knew the Capitol really well. I knew the Senate and House office buildings really well. And I loved that job. It was exciting. So I agree with you though. CQ is not exciting.
No, sorry. But I'm surprised that after Haverford, you did not go back down there. Most people who do the summer thing in D.C. end up going back to D.C. You were not tempted?
No, I still don't really like the culture of Washington very much. And it's not a political thing. It's what I remember vividly from when I was at CQ. We'd go to parties. There were a lot of parties. The reporters and the writers would, and they'd let the interns come along. And I just remember that every party I'd go to, it was the same thing. There was this immediate, I don't know if it's still this way, but it feels like it is to me. immediately everybody would determine what status everybody else in the room was, and bet, the party would organize along those lines. And once it was established that I was an intern, like I didn't even exist, but people would like come up with these elaborate reasons why they were important, because they were connected to this person who was a close aide, to a close assistant, to a close sub-assistant, to the secretary of something, that kind of thing. I hated that.
Yeah, the deputy assistant secretaries at DOT are not really high up on the world's hierarchy, but they do think they are.
Yeah.
What I liked about Crossover, you either worked with or are friends with David Vondrelli, who was my editor occasionally at the Post, who I love as the best editor, along with Michael Duffy I've ever had. Have you read his new book, The Book of Charlie?
I have not, but I will. I'm a big fan of David Vondrelli. He's a great writer and a great guy.
Yes. Yeah, it's a fabulous book. Okay, here's my disappointment. There was no discussion at all in Class Clown of Chloe or perimeters or even the name Jack Bauer. What was this choice on your part?
That's probably a little bit inside baseball. Yeah, back when 24 was a thing, I don't even kind of evolved, but my blog became sort of the clearinghouse for people who love to watch 24, and I would live blog it, and it was, as you know, one of the most preposterous shows ever on television, and I mean that in a good way. But I kind of felt, now it's been a while, I'm not sure how many of us are left who really remember Jack and Chloe. Does anybody?
Oh, my wife and I, the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I, would finish watching an episode of 24 and immediately go to daveberry.com to see what we wouldn't do it during the blog, but it's just so doggone funny because it's such a preposterous show, but nevertheless, very entertaining. Have you ever done that for any other show?
No. It was a lot of work, really. It was like a lot of pressure once it started to build and there was an audience for it. But I don't think, not too many shows could have a nuclear bomb go off in like episode 1, and then by episode 3, you've kind of forgotten that there was a nuclear bomb in the United States because so many other things have happened.
Well, there's so much people don't know about you, Dave Barry. You've written 44 books and 2 screenplays that made it onto the screen, of about 50 screenplays, if I'm to believe the process that you outlined here. Don't ever be a screenwriter, America. That should be the subtitle. Don't ever be a screenwriter. Be a humorist. But I also didn't know that you wrote young adult novels, and I ordered yesterday Peter and the Starcatcher for my scholarly 13-year-old granddaughter because she, young adult fiction has to be 400 pages to move. Did you find yourself just saying, let's add a few thousand words here?
No, it kind of happened. It was weird. Ridley Pearson was my co-author on that, my bandmate, Ridley Pearson. And it was his idea originally, his daughter's idea. He was reading Jan Barry's Peter Pan to her, and she stopped him and said, "How did Peter Pan meet Captain Hook in the first place?" And he's like, "I don't know, maybe that's a book." And then he asked me, would I be interested? And I thought, yeah, but we didn't intend it to be a massive YA fiction book. We intended it to be just a little book, and we just got all wrapped up in it. He's a thriller writer, so he's like very convoluted, and it just became this 400-something page book. Which was really not our intention originally, but then we wrote a bunch more. But that's like what you do now in YA, because really we owe the Harry Potter series she kind of proved that kids would read long books. That we didn't plan it that way, just kind of ended up that way.
Well, how many are in the series, Dave Barry? Because I hope there are a lot. Keeping up with my granddaughter's reading consumption needs with acceptable YA titles is a challenge. It really is.
I hope they're acceptable. There are 5 of them. So yeah, and they're all pretty big. They're all like 400 or 500 pages.
Are you doing more of them?
No, we stopped, I don't know, like maybe 15 years ago, and moved on. He's doing his thing and I'm doing my thing. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Man. All right, next shocker. You took a side swipe at Barry Manilow. I noticed it. Not many people will, but I noticed it, and I like Barry Manilow. You were kind of rough on Paul Zongas, saying he's a man so low-key he's capable of photosynthesis, and a man who made Michael Dukakis seem like James Brown. And you were kind of hard on Ruben Askew, who you accused of having an almost life-threatening lack of charisma. Is there anyone else in the Zonga Askew category?
No, but I got to say, Paul Tsongas, I really liked him, and I wanted him to win and become president of the United States just because I had this one interaction with him. Um, I like to do anagrams, and I was in New Hampshire it was my want back then, writing columns about the New Hampshire primary, and at some point I noted that Paul A. Tsongas could be rearranged to spell gaseous plant. And so he was at the time the front runner. He was ahead of Bill Clinton this was going on. And so does some press event, and it's just giant press cloud around him, as is the way. And I go up to him in the middle of this press cloud and go, Senator Tsongas, do you have any comment on the allegation that your name can be rearranged to spell gaseous plant? And he does not break, in no way change his character. And he goes, I have no evidence to indicate that is the truth, or something like that. He gave me a very serious.
It's a very funny story. It's in Class Clown. I will continue playing more of my interview with Dave Barry, which I tape right before the show tomorrow. In the meantime, go and get Class Clown. You will thank me. It's so funny. More Dave Barry tomorrow. This is the first of many episodes in this new feature of my show. Maybe Eric Adams isn't so bad. For my first guest on Maybe Eric Adams Isn't So Bad, Abe Greenwald, executive editor of Commentary Magazine, joins me. I heard Abe this morning on the Commentary podcast, where there was a collective slitting of wrists and moaning and groaning, except for Continetti, of course, who doesn't live in New York. Hey, Abe, welcome. How bad is it?
Thanks for having me. It is as bad as you would think, and then, as I'm prone to say, it's worse than that.
It's worse than
it
that.
It is bad because of some sort of conventional political reasons. I mean, Mamdani is an overt socialist who believes in all sorts of impossible schemes about take government control of stores and freezing rents. But beyond all that, he has a very obvious history of embracing anti-Semitic movements, of himself refusing to say that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. He founded his college's chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine, and he defends the genocidal slogans of the pro-Hamas demonstrators. All of this coming some 20 months after relentless anti-Semitic pro-terrorist agitation and assault, including murders, is really quite a blow to the city, but I think to the country, because it remains to be seen to what extent the Democratic Party looks at his success and says, ooh, that's the model. And then we have this kind of thing very possibly going national.
Abe, I don't know if you remember, but when Barack Obama spoke to the 2004 Democratic Convention, he was not well known, and he blew the roof off, and he was the nominee 4 years later after being in the Senate 4 years. I think Mamdani could very well run for president in 3 years. He'll be constitutionally eligible. If he goes in there and just has a viral video a day, no matter what a wreck he makes of the rest of the city, he'd be formidable, wouldn't he?
I mean, look, the thing is, you have to give him credit. Unlike a great many people who espouse crazy and toxic ideas, he does so in a way that is charismatic. And, I'll tell you, there's a sort of funny aside here, which is that, commentary is very small, so you wouldn't believe all the different jobs I have to do. And when I edit a post that goes up on the website, I have to find the images for it. And a few times our Seth Mandel has written very brilliantly about Mamdani, and then I go to find an image. You cannot find, there does not exist an image of him taken by the big press companies that doesn't show him looking jolly, ingratiating, happy, sleeves rolled up, smiling with regular folks. I mean, and Obama had a certain kind of magic to him. Whatever you think of his policies, I'm not a fan at all. He undoubtedly had a certain kind of magic to him as a performer, as a retail politician. Mamdani has that.
So I've always thought that the Democrats would go left in 2028 because they did in 1972 after they lost a close one, and they did again in 1984 after they lost a blowout one in 1980 to Reagan. They deal with rejection, overwhelming rejection, by going hard left. Can you go to the left of Mamdani? I mean, is it possible? Is anyone won with a further left position in the city before?
As Mamdani said last night in his acceptance speech, you always think it's impossible until it's done. So I don't know. I can't. It's hard to imagine going to the left of Mamdani. I mean, we look at Europe and a lot of the Islamist political infiltration that's happened over there, and I don't know. Is that conceivable here? Hard to imagine, but maybe something like it. But this is as far left and as radical and as overt, as overtly radical as we've ever seen. He has not walked back or tried to finesse his embrace of the term globalize the Intifada. I mean, this is
I think he's going to lose every Jewish vote in New York. It's impossible for me to imagine there's more than 5% of Jews in New York who will vote for him. But what about people who aren't interested in Israel at all? They're just agnostic on it. The idea of a government-run grocery store is the worst idea ever. Grocery stores are the greatest testament to capitalism ever, and you can't ever bring anyone from a third world country or a communist country to the United States and take them to the average market Safeway on any corner, and they're not amazed and gobsmacked by the variety. What does he propose to do there?
Who was it? Gorbachev or Yeltsin, who was sort of whose eyes were opened by going to an American supermarket?
I think it was Gorby.
Yeah, I mean, so there you go. It was, you literally had a communist come and see the glory of the free market in all its splendor and bounty, and sort of, turn himself around. So there's a sort of perfect. Now we have a perfect reversal here of a guy who wants the other. He wants the other way around. He wants reverse glasnost or reverse.
Has he explained how he's going to do it, though? It really is impossible to do for a government agency. I can't imagine them. No matter how much money they spent on it, they would not be able to do it. It requires too many decisions made in real time based upon customer preferences and discounts for shelving and all sorts of different things. It's not something government can do.
No, of course not. And, he is an avowed socialist, and socialism is full of impossible promises and proclamations, including the 19th century French socialist Fournier's prediction that when you achieve a perfect socialist state, the oceans will turn to lemonade. That was a serious prediction on his part. So the feasibility doesn't come into question.
All right, last question, Abe. What's he going to do about police? Because every time I go to New York, it gets worse. I first went there in 1980, and it got better until probably 5 years ago. How much worse can it become?
Oh, well, this has been, my concern. It's funny. I was just having this conversation that, the police just got Jessica Tisch involved to sort of clean things up. And she's done a tremendous job of straightening out the NYPD and making subways more secure. And the cops love her. She comes from a very wealthy family. The cops love her, and she's doing a good job of cracking down on crime, which leads me to believe she will be among the very first to go in his book.
Wow. Abe Greenwald, thank you for the first edition of Maybe Eric Adams Isn't So Bad. There will be many more in the future. Listen to Commentary Podcast today. If you want a true collective slitting of wrists, that's it. Coming up, Rick Atkinson, historian extraordinaire on the second volume in his Revolutionary War trilogy. But I'm joined by Sarah C. Bedford first of the Washington Examiner. She is our ace congressional reporter up there. Sarah, I've talked to Leader Thune today. I talked to Jason Smith. They're both optimists. Ought we to be as optimistic as either or both of them are about the one big, beautiful bill getting done by July 4?
You know, if you take the public conversation at face value, I would say I'm less optimistic than that because you do still have some pretty prominent holdouts. You have Senator Ron Johnson, who says, look, this bill doesn't reduce the deficit, and that's what conservatives should want. You have Susan Collins of Maine, who is saying that the House pursued, and therefore she wants to see those watered down as well. So you do still have those prominent holdouts. And while a lot of this progress is happening behind closed doors at the current moment, they're still pretty far apart on some of those key issues.
We spent most of the time talking about SALT. And what Leader Thune said is, we don't like it in the Senate. We thought it was a great reform, but obviously we got to pay attention to the House. Jason Smith said we're trying to thread a needle here, and I think we're 90% of the way there. Does anyone not think they're going to get there that goes on the record with you, not named anyone from Kentucky?
If they're not named Thomas Massey, then no. You have a lot of optimism from the Republicans. I do think there's reasons for that. But the SALT sticking point that you mentioned, I feel as though that's the biggest one. You have the blue state Republicans in the House who are saying they will not vote for this legislation if you don't raise that SALT deduction to the deal in the House was $40,000. The senators are saying, look, we don't really have any Republican senators from a blue state. So this is not a problem for any of our members, and we're not willing to swallow that pill, which was a tough one for conservatives in the House to swallow as well. But the senators have a different set of incentives. And how do you keep Mike Lawler and other, New York Republicans on board if you water down that SALT provision when the status quo for them, when the sunsetting of the Trump tax cuts would be better for their constituents?
Well, Sarah, I think the answer, I've mentioned this before, Steve Daines told me early this week, is drop the cap to 40 or 35,000 and limit who can use it to those who make less than, say, $250,000 combined income, which seems perfectly reasonable to me. Otherwise, it's just a tax cut for the rich. Does that work with the Mike Lawlers of the world, who I like? I should ask Mike myself, but what do you hear from them? Is it 40K or pound sand?
Well, they also means tested it, but again, it is still could very easily be construed as a tax cut for the rich because the upper income limit on that is $500,000. If you're making $500,000, you're very likely extremely very comfortable. And so the tax deduction still applies to you if you're making that much money. So yeah, I think it is a valid criticism from the conservatives. And, after all of this work, are the blue state Republicans going to blow up the progress over the size of that deduction? That's not clear.
I just don't think they will. Now, let me ask you if you've had any reaction to the nomination last night by the Democrats in New York of Mr. Mamdani, because, boy, he's a wacky lefty.
I think there's a lot of nervousness among Democrats on Capitol Hill. You had Hakeem Jeffries, you had Chuck Schumer come out and commend Mamdani on a campaign well run and, for his focus on economic issues, but they did not offer full-throated endorsements. And I think there's a little bit of nervousness that Mamdani could become the face of the Democratic Party with his kind of sort of far left ideas that, if put into practice, could make a lot of New York City's problems much worse. There's a fear that he could sort of become a caricature of the left that will only help Republicans going into the midterms.
Oh, I think he can run for president, Sarah. I think like Barack Obama did 4 years in the Senate and off to the races he went. Mamdani can do 3 years in the Big Apple no matter what happens, and then just declare for president because he's a wacky lefty. He's way out there. Has anyone said, no, thank you, not my cup of tea, like a John Fetterman or anybody?
I think that Democrats are still sort of assessing how to deal with this. They were sort of trying to still swallow the pill of Cuomo returning and how to dance around the sexual harassment allegations against him. This was, I think, a surprise to a lot of people in Washington. Maybe if you were covering the race on the ground in New York City, it didn't surprise you. But I think on Capitol Hill, there was a lot of shock that this occurred and head scratching as to how do we approach this when this is someone who could really make our party look bad by still embracing some of the ideas that Democrats have acknowledged didn't work for them, such as defund the police.
Yeah, it's going to get worse and worse as we get closer to the election. Sarah Bedford, thank you. Follow her on X at Sarah C. Bedford. Read her every day in the Washington Examiner. And come right back for Rick Atkinson. By the way, the rest of my interview with Dave Barry is already posted on my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt YouTube. I would love it if you like and subscribe the channel. It works magic on the algorithm, so more interviews like mine with Dave Barry or upcoming with Rick Atkinson get sent out to more people. So thank you in advance for heading over to YouTube, finding Hugh Hewitt's YouTube channel, and liking and subscribing to it and to my daily podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh. As promised, Rick Atkinson joins me. He's the author most recently of The Fate of the Day. The Fate of the Day is the second in a planned trilogy of books about the American Revolution, the first one of which, The British Are Coming, was a runaway bestseller because it was a fabulous retelling of the first year of the war. And Rick joins us now. From no idea from where. I understand you had a tree fall on your house, Rick.
Yeah, hi, Hugh. I wish I were coming to you from better circumstances, but yeah, I live in the District of Columbia. There was a terrible storm here on Thursday night. I was actually with the President and Mrs. Bush, and we got word that 125-foot red oak had fallen on the house. So right now I am in the basement of my son's house in the District of Columbia, and that's why it looks pretty crude.
Well, I'm glad you made it. I have been wanting to talk to you since you gave a eulogy for Fred Hyatt. I thought was marvelous, and then I went and read The British Are Coming, which I also thought was marvelous. So I couldn't wait for part two to come out. Can you reconstruct for people how you fell into this project, which is so timely, given that we're a couple of months into our 250th birthday celebration, which really ought to have begun in April of this year?
Yes, Hugh. I'm a military historian. I did work at the Washington Post for some years. Fred Hyatt, the former editorial page editor, was my closest friend for 40 years. I wrote over the course of almost 15 years, 3 volumes about the American role in the liberation of Europe in World War II, North Africa, Sicily and Italy, Western Europe. And even before I finished that third and final volume in 2013, I was thinking about what to do next. The obvious thing would have been to pivot to the Pacific and do for that what I'd done for the campaigns in the Mediterranean and in Western Europe. But I didn't really have the heart for it, to be honest. And I've always been interested in the revolution since I was a kid. I've spent a lot of time with our contemporary military and as a journalist and as a historian. So I wanted to go back and understand where that military came from. And it comes from the revolution. It comes from the Continental Army. So I began the first volume, The British Are Coming, is the first 2 years of the war, published in 2019. And this is the middle volume of what I hope, knock wood, will be a trilogy. And this is the middle years of the war. It's from 1777 to 1780, where a lot happens, including the fact that, a brush fire on the edge of the British Empire turns into a global conflagration, a global war, a civil war, fought on 4 continents globally in the 7 seas. So a lot happens in this book.
Yeah, I want to compliment you. I think the revolution is something about which most Americans know something. Ever since the musical Hamilton, they know a little bit more. But even a pretty well-read American, I think I'm in that category, will not know 90% of what you write here. I mean, I did not know, just randomly, that our Civil War prompted a civil war among the Iroquois. I never knew that. So
Yeah.
how many discoveries do you make along the way in writing this book?
Well, that's one of the pleasures of doing this. I get surprised every day. The mystery of the next unopened archival box is one of the things that gets me up in the morning. But yeah, I think you're right. And the revolution for most Americans, I think, has, in retrospect, 250 years later, a kind of faded lithograph quality to it. It's sepia tones, when in fact it's bloody, it's nasty, it's internecine. It is civil wars within civil wars, first between the British and the Americans, then between Americans and Americans, loyalists versus rebels. And then, as you say, the Indians are forced to choose sides. So the Six Nations of the Iroquois, 4 of them align with the British, 2 of them align with the rebels, with the Americans. And, they've gotten along quite well for more than a century, and the Indians are fighting each other. So there's a lot of collateral damage in this, as there is in most civil wars.
Yeah, and I will say, as I was finishing the book a few weeks ago, I was in Savannah, and just as Leo was being elected Pope, and here's this Colonel Prevost leading the defense of Savannah against the Patriots, the Americans, the colonials, and a Prevost gets elected Pope. I mean, it was very coincidental. They are not related. I subsequently went and looked that up. But Savannah is, of course, full of Revolutionary War sites, which I wasn't even looking for until I read your book. Do most people, associate Savannah with the Revolutionary War?
I think not. I think most people don't even realize that Georgia was one of the original 13 colonies. Somewhat reluctantly joining the war, they were the last to and it's a very small place compared to, say, Virginia. But you're right, Savannah is pretty critical when the British are not having much success in the north, and they adopt what's called the Southern strategy, and they decide they're going to try and roll up the insurrection from south to north. They capture Savannah without much difficulty. A combined Franco-American force with a French fleet under Admiral d'Estaing attacks and is soundly defeated. D'Estaing is badly wounded. Savannah is where Nathaniel Greene, who's second only to George Washington as the indispensable man in the Continental Army, is where he's buried, because after the war, in compensation for his enormous services, he's given the property, the plantations of a couple of loyalist plantations, and Greene, who's a Rhode Islander, moves down there and dies of sunstroke. So, and he's buried in Savannah. He never gets back to Rhode Island. So, we find the obscure places like Savannah and other places that people don't normally associate with the revolution. The Wabash River, for example, in Indiana, are in fact tangled up in this thing we call the American Revolution.
When I come back with Rick after the break in the extended portion of this interview, I'm going to talk about just a few of those people, but he does also put himself in the shoes of the Brits, which makes The Fate of the Day really unique, and I can't recommend it highly enough. I'm going to air the rest of my interview with Rick Atkinson on today's podcast. I may try and play some of it tomorrow. It's a fabulous book, The Fate of the Day. And The British Are Coming was an even more fabulous book, and the two of them together will educate, entertain, and enlighten anyone, so I really want to recommend them to you. I want to take a moment, though, to tell you about andrewandtodd.com before I wrap up the show by reminding you about Relief Factor. I may be able to, I'm going out to do a dinner tonight with some clients here in town, people who support the program, and looking forward to it. But I'll be moving slow, and I'll be moving slow because of the bad back, but it's getting better. Before I tell you about Relief Factor, though, let me remind you about Andrew and Todd. One of my kids is trying to buy a house right now, and it's not easy. And I only answer questions when I'm asked for advice. And I do answer questions and about offers and counter offers and things like that. But I really don't know much about the mechanics of getting loans done. And I tell everyone, whether I'm related to them or not, call up Andrew Del Rey or call up Todd Avakian and walk through your situation with them first. 888-888-1172. If you're going to take a loan out, before you do anything else, talk to andrewandtodd.com. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Sierra Pacific Mortgage is a lender. They've been sponsors of this show. They are sponsors of this show for, 12 years now. And Andrew Del Rey did the loan for me when I moved from California to the Beltway. Did Dwayne's loan, done loans for all my kids, done loans for everyone in Salem that I know of. And the simple reason is that andrewandtodd.com take care of the people who call them up. 888-888-1172. They really do. They care about you not buying too much house, not being crushed by a mortgage payment, being realistic about commutes, home inspection, everything, insurance, soup to nuts, and they underwrite the loan. They'll tell you how much you can borrow, and they will qualify you for the loan before you walk in. Now, the country's become unevenly divided between hot housing markets and stone cold, deader than dead housing markets. And it's because interest rates are in the sixes, and they just don't know. So call them, 888-888-1172. Finally, do not forget, you saw me take it in hour number one. There's my relief factor, and I expect it will kick in time for me to get and go about and around for the dinner tonight, and I'm very grateful for it. If you take it every day and you keep up your exercise every day, rare will be the days that you are not able to exercise. And that's just the hardcore truth. Start with 100 yards today, go up to 200 yards tomorrow. Order your relief factor right now. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800-4-RELIEF. The starter pack is $19.95. 3-week supply, less than $1 a day. All you have to do to get that is go to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Everything will be posted over at Hugh Hewitt's YouTube channel, except, of course, relieffactor.com, which you got to hear from me. And remember, don't feel bad another day. Go order relieffactor.com today.